In this chapter, we will locate the position of each of the 192 suktas of the first mandala of Rig Veda in the human physiology. The 192 suktas of the first mandala are represented in the physiology by the neuronal fibers within the brain and the peripheral nervous system. All neuronal fibers that correspond to the first mandala of Rig Veda carry two complementary components that are necessary for experience. These are inhibitory and excitatory messages. For example, in order to obtain visual information, it is necessary for certain neurons to be inhibited and others to be excited. In order to move an arm, some muscles will be activated, called agonistic, and some muscles will be inhibited, called antagonistic. Inhibitory and excitatory messages such as these allow for the differentiation and balance necessary for every sensory and motor experience. The first sukta of the first mandala corresponds to the gray matter of the cerebral cortex. We see the first sukta blinking.
The full elaboration of action and perception resides in the higher cortical layers of the central nervous system, which correspond to the first sukta of Rig Veda, which is now blinking. According to Mahashi's Aparishaya Bhashya, the first sukta, or full elaboration, has a complementary sukta, which is unmanifest, unexpressed, or silent. Opposite Sukta 1 of the first mandal is Sukta 97, which corresponds to the tip of the spinal cord in the silent filum terminale. This sukta is silent, just like the filum terminale in the physiology. This is Sukta 95, this Sukta 96, and this is Sukta 97, the silent filum terminale. And here is Sukta 98, Sukta 99. Between the cortex of the brain and the tip of the spinal cord, there is a hollow canal called the central canal. This canal, now seen blinking in red, corresponds to the value of Sushumna in Veda.
Suktas 2 to 28 and Suktas 98 to 124 are inside the brain. In order to make them visible, we will now display a section through the brain. Therefore, we are now changing to a three-dimensional model on the screen. Now we are looking at the brain from what is called the sagittal plane perspective. Let us see where Sukta 1 is located from this perspective. Now we see blinking the gray matter of the cerebral cortex, which represents Sukta 1. Now we see the corpus callosum blinking, which represents Suktas 2 and 98. The intercortical fibers, which connect the brain cortex of the two hemispheres, are bundled together here. Since this structure looks like an arched callus bridge, it is called the corpus callosum. Now we will change to a different section through the brain to display the corona radiata. The corona radiata is the physical structure in the center of the brain that looks like a radiating crown, and which is made of all the neuronal fibers that reach out from the thalamus towards the brain cortex. We now see the corona radiata blinking. The corona radiata forms a major part of the cerebral hemisphere's white matter. Because there are two thalami on both sides of the brain, there are also two corona radiata. Suktas 3 and 99 correspond to the left corona radiata, which is blinking now. Suktas 4 and 100 correspond to the right corona radiata, which is blinking now. We will now change our view to display the cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are visible only from below. That is why we are now turning the model. The cranial nerves are composed of 12 pairs of nerves that emanate from the nervous tissue of the brain. We now see the location of the cranial nerves blinking. In order for the cranial nerves to reach their targets, they must ultimately exit and enter the cranium through openings in the skull. Hence, their name is derived from their association with the cranium, which is the Latin word for skull. Suktas 5 to 28 and Suktas 101 to 124 correspond to the 24 cranial nerves. The function of the cranial nerves is to carry messages to the head and neck. The motor components of the cranial nerves transmit nerve impulses from the brain to target tissue outside the brain, and the sensory components transmit nerve impulses from sensory organs to the brain. Now we will again change our view to show the spinal nerves. There are 34 pairs of spinal nerves. We see them blinking. Suktas 29 to 96 and Suktas 125 to 192 of the first mandala of Rig Veda correspond to the spinal nerves. Now we have located all 192 suktas of the first mandala of Rig Veda into human physiology. Now we are zooming in on a section of the spinal cord. This is a section of the spinal cord. And these are nerve rootlets emerging from the spinal cord. As we can see, nerve rootlets are these small roots. Rootlets are branches of a root, offshoots of a root. They are finer divisions of a root that come together to form a large root. These small fibers come together to make cervical nerve 3. At this point, the rootlets join together and exit the spinal column through small holes between the vertebral bones. These rootlets join together or unify to form one spinal nerve, which is a pathway for all information that travels from the central nervous system to the periphery, such as muscles or inner organs. The spinal nerves provide innervations to body areas below the neck. This joining together of the rootlets of the spinal nerves creates a unifying effect in order to carry information silently through the body. On the other hand, the differentiation of that nerve in the periphery creates a diversifying effect in order to supply a particular quality of information to a particular area in the physiology. Both values are there, unity and diversity. The particular quality of a spinal nerve emerges from a particular sound of the sutra. One sutra is contributing so much of the nature of Shiva, so much of the nature of Vishnu, so much of the nature of Mahalakshmi, and so many diverse values. This is how the values of Rishi, Devata, and Chandas come together to create one specific effect in the physiology. All the three values are there. No matter what value of Rishi would connect with a particular value of Devata, connecting with a particular value of Chandas, all these three together will produce that particular quality. This indicates that diversity is unity, but with a very specific style, not random. Infinite variety has to be sorted out in so many clear-cut terms, and then, in a very systematic manner, it turns out to be one particular value, unity. Diversity in unity, unity in diversity. This is how an infinite number of Rishi, Devata, and Chandas join together in order to form the 192 values of the first mandala, and then they join together in 8 divided values to form the mandalas 2 to 9, in one unified value, para value, silent value, a Purusha value, to form the 10th mandala. Unity in diversity is not only a conceptual, intellectual theme of life, but a material, concrete value that makes sure a particular value is always the same as it was before. Yata purvam akalpayat. The infinite variety is not organized randomly, but in a very systematic manner, as it was before. That is the only way that the infinite variety could be eternally in terms of unity, the only way that the basis of life is in perfect order. The joy of being awake in that order will create the realization of total awakening in the light of God within. This intellectual understanding of the material expression of the unmanifest value of nature enables us to live this reality in all levels of daily life. It is precisely demonstrated in the structure and function of the physiology. This display of total reality has 2 levels, unmanifest and manifest, both ways. Knowing it is being it, and knowing it is living it. Enlightenment means there is no doubt left about anything. Each sukt of the first mandala of Rig Veda is made out of many riches. Now we will show the riches of Sukt 34. Here are riches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We can see, therefore, that Sukta 34 is made out of 12 riches. Now we see cervical nerve 3, which corresponds to Sukta 34. And we will now see that it is made out of 12 nerve rootlets, which correspond 1-to-1 to the 12 riches of Sukta 34. Here we see nerve rootlet 1, which corresponds to Richa 1. And this is rootlet 2, which corresponds to Richa 2. And this is rootlet 3, which corresponds to Richa 3. And this is rootlet 4, which corresponds to Richa 4 of Sukta 34. This is rootlet 5, which corresponds to Richa 5. This is rootlet 6, which corresponds to Richa 6. This is rootlet 7, which corresponds to Richa 7. This is rootlet 8, which corresponds to Richa 8. This is rootlet 9, which corresponds to Richa 9. This is rootlet 10, corresponding to Richa 10 of Sukta 34. This is rootlet 11, corresponding to Richa 11. This is rootlet 12, corresponding to Richa 12. We have seen that each of the nerve rootlets of cervical nerve 3 represents one Richa of Sukta 34. We now see all 12 nerve rootlets blinking. Now we will hear Sukta 34, and we will see that each Richa of Sukta 34 is being inscribed into its corresponding nerve rootlet as it is being recited. Then we can see where each syllable of each richa of Sukta 34 is located in the spinal nerve. Now let us listen to the recitation.
Tristinno Adya bhavatanna vedasa vibhurvanyama utaratirashvina Yuvorhi yantram himye vasasobhyayam senya bhavatam manishibhihi Trayah pavayo madhubahane rathe somasya vena manubhishva idviduh Trayaskambhasaskabhitasa arabhe trirnaktay yathastrirvashvinadiva Samane ahantriravadyagੋਹਨਾtriradhyayajñam madhuna mimikshatam Trirvajavatirisho ashvinayubandosha astabhyamushasascha pinvatam Trirvartiriya tantrirano jane trissupravye Tredheva shikshatam Trirnandyam bahatamashvina yubantrih praksho Asme akshare eva pinvatam
We will halt the animation here and explain again what we are seeing. Suktas 29 to 96 of the first mandal of Rig Veda correspond to the excitatory stimuli in the spinal nerves. Suktas 125 to 192 correspond to the inhibitory stimuli occurring in the same spinal nerves.
Now we are zooming in on a section of the spinal cord.
We see that this nerve has many rootlets. Cervical nerve 3, which is blinking now, corresponds to Sukta 34. As we can see, Sukta 34 is made out of 12 richas. Correspondingly, cervical nerve 3 is made of 12 nerve rootlets. The 12 nerve rootlets of cervical nerve 3 correspond 1 to 1 with the 12 richas of Sukta 34. The parts of the rootlets of cervical nerve 3 will light up as the corresponding words of Sukta 34 are pronounced.
Now we will hear Sukta 34, and we will see that each richa of Sukta 34 is being inscribed into its corresponding nerve rootlet as it is being recited. Then we can see where each syllable of each richa of Sukta 34 is located in the spinal nerve. The individual richas, as they flow from left to right, represent something specific, and when they all join together, they get into the non-specific value of each of the specific. For example, there is a big nerve that goes to the arm, and as such it is a holistic nerve that goes to a holistic area. So the nerve goes to the whole arm, and as such is not specific. But when the nerve is branching out into the rootlets, it becomes specific and characteristic. The rootlets go to specific small areas. small parts of the finger or small muscles, individual muscles, very tiny fibers of muscles. So this makes it very specific and differentiated, whereas the entire bundle is a wholeness, which you would call the entire arm. This is a wholeness on the physiological level, a sense of the Purusha value, the witnessing value, a lack of activity, but with a sense of liveliness. And when the spinal nerve is again branching out, it becomes specific. So when all the rootlets have come together, they represent the sukt as a whole. And when the spinal nerve is separating out into the individual rootlets, it represents the sukt in terms of its riches. Now we will continue listening to the chanting of Sukt 34. And we will see that each richa of Sukta 34 is being inscribed into its corresponding nerve rootlet as it is being recited. Then we can see where each syllable of each richa of Sukta 34 is located in the spinal nerve.
Trirno rajim vahatamashvina jubantrirdevata ata trirutavatantiyaha Trissau bhagatvam trirutashrava sirastrishtham vam sure duhitaruhadratham Trirno ashvina divyani bheshajat trih parthivani trirudattamadbhyaha Omanam shanyormamakaya sunave tridhatu sharma vahatam shubhaspati Trirno ashvinaya jata dive dive parit tridhatu prithivīmashayatam Tisrona asatyaratthya paravata atme vavatasvasarani gacchatam Trirashvina sindhubhis saptama atrabhis Traya ahavastredhaha vishkritam Tisrah prathivirupari pravadivo nakam rakshethedhyubhiraktubhirhitam Kva atri chakrat Trivrato rathasya kva atrayo bandhuro yesanīlaha kada yogo vajino rasabhasya yena yajnana satyopayathaha Ana asatya gacchatam hūyate havirmadhvah pibatam madhupebhirasabhihi Yuborhi purvam savitosha sorathamritaya chitrang kritavan tamishyati Ana asatya tribhire ekadashairiha devebhiriyatam madhupeyamashvina prayostarishtanirapamsi mriksham क्षतं सेधतं द्वेषो भवतं स चाभुवा आनो अश्विना त्रिव्रता रथेनार्वाञ्चम् रयिं वहतं सुवीरम् शृण्वन्ता वामवसेजो हवीमि वृथे च नो भवतं वाजसातौ
These physical structures are the sequential physical expression of the vibrations of the words of the Ved. What we saw was the mechanics of transformation of consciousness into physiological fibers. These physiological fibers are the evolution of the reverberations of speech.
This is the demonstration of how Brahma, the Creator, made creation. As he said the words, creation came out. What he said, that got produced. As in the saying, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That has demonstrated to us that the vibrations of speech appear as concrete expressions of physiological quality. When the sound is recited, then the nerve becomes vital, more lively. That is because that is the basic sound which initially created that nerve. The initial sound made that thing, and because it is made of that, when we supply it, then we supply nourishment. Jai Gurudev.